Hello again, this is Stefano Ritteri. You might remember me from part 1 and part 2 of this mixing tutorial with Point Blank. And this is part 3. And I'm just showing you what I'm doing in terms of automations when the mix is pretty much done. And I'm happy with the levels. I try to do a little bit of automations to create a bit of interest in the song. And normally what I do is I set up effects channels as much as I set up reverbs or delays for actual mixing purposes. I like to set up normally 1 or 2 long delay effects that I can apply to the separate sounds, so I can open and close my sends and returns and create differences. And normally this helps me to create also to put the parts together. So for example, we're listening to this remix that I've done with my man Manuel Music, and if we listen to the breakdown, if we go in the separate sounds, the kalimba that we were listening to before, we will see that pretty much all the separate sounds, they have my R, which is the reading automation on, which means they all have, I'm opening now all the automations for all the tracks, and you can see that all these automations that you can see is basically me opening and closing dub delays. In this case, I can show you it's 2 Roland delays. I really like them because they replicate the super cool dub delay from Roland, the Space Echo, and it sounds really, really amazing, and it's very easy to set them up in a way that they go in feedback and they never stop working. And it's pretty funny because sometimes they do whatever they want, and sometimes they don't behave the way I program them, and I like these little mistakes. I think they create a little bit of love in the song. So in this case, I set them up. Normally what I do is I just turn them on and just go randomly with I try not to sync them to the project. I like to go a bit random and find a nice setting for them to go, and with a fairly long intensity, which is the feedback. And if you have to be careful, because if the intensity is a bit too much, then it goes into feedback by itself, and it's kind of dangerous, if you can see, even without a sound. And if this happens when you are going in the other room for a snack or something, you can really have troubles with neighbors or your speakers when your speakers are really loud. So the intensity is a bit dangerous to work with, but these delays are really amazing. And all I do, as you can see here from the automations, I open and close them, not randomly, but almost in a way that the dub mixer like Mr. Lee Scratch Perry used to do. So if I play the kalimba, for example, in solo, you can see in the moment that I add the send, and as you can see, this happens right before the breakdown, and then it's off again. So this helps creating in the whole track an effect of, it kind of makes the 2 parts connect a bit, even though it's a very subtle. And then again, it does it in the breakdown, and it does also the guitar, particularly the guitar. We can hear it starts already with some delays from guitar rig, but you can see that the 2 dub delays are adding more and more, because we can see that the breakdown is coming to an end. So I want the maximum expression until it becomes pretty empty. You see the guitar now, it's leaving, but the delay leaves a tail that then leaves those few seconds here. This is a combination of the 2 delays that I automate on the sounds. And sometimes I do it with reverbs, and sometimes I do it with delays. And I do it also sometimes on the drum sounds or on separate sounds, just randomly open one of the delays, sometimes quite randomly, and it just creates a little bit of atmosphere. And I'm a big fan of dub. in general. So even opening it and closing it on a hi-hat sometimes, like Lee Scratch Perry used to do, I was always amazed by watching the videos of Lee Scratch Perry just standing up. And for him, the whole automation, which is for us, it's an automation, for him, it was actually a live recording because everything was going on tape. So him standing up on this mixer and opening and closing the sends to create this vibe of dub, I really always admire that. So I try to do it in every song, again with delays, with reverbs, with whatever effect. That creates a bit of fun. And I normally try to do this when the mix is done, so I'm not worried about the levels. I find that it gives a little edge, a little bit more shine to the song, even though the separate sounds might be like the synthesizers have their own automations with filters or envelopes or whatever. A little bit of delay and reverb adds some love to the tracks, as Lee Scratch Perry, is teaching us. And so after this is done, normally I would take a break. Sometimes even like let the song stay there and listen to it again the next day and try to commit though to the mix. Like I don't like to do different mixes. I try to, leave some hours, or if I can at night, in between, listening sessions, and then I don't want to save it and try another mix. I try to commit. I try to be as quick as possible, like in the analog days where you had to mix and then the mix was gone because you go on another, you mix another record and you don't have, anymore the settings of the compressors and stuff. So I listen to it after a few hours or a night or some days when I have time, and I listen to the automations that I didn't go to Lee Scratch Perry on it. And then what I do is I'm printing a 24-bit version for the mastering engineer. I normally have a good relationship with mastering engineers. I try to use always the same 2 or 3 studios when it's possible, so I know who's going to master my stuff, and I try to give them a mix which peaks at -7, normally -4, -7 on the Cubase. Even with all my compressors and stuff, they don't really add volume. It's more for dynamic control. And then when I'm printing my 24-bit version, I want to try the song as soon as possible to see if it actually works in the club and to see if the mix works in the club. So what I would do is I do fake mastering. There is many ways of doing a fake mastering. Lots of people are doing it with plugins, and in my case I find normally a combination of plugins works for me. What I would do is after I printed my 24-bit version, I would go on my master bus and play around with plugins. I already have quite some stuff on it, so it doesn't really need much. What I would do is I would add, for example, a spatial. There is this plugin which is just in Cubase. It's called Stereo Enhancer, and it has a dance master plugin preset, which simply adds a little bit of phase difference, and I just leave it on like this. Again, I check always that I'm not playing around too much with the phase, and then what I would do is I would add I would say a bit more of a hard compression on limiting, but I try to do before a compressor and then a limiter. So what would I do is I would add, for example, another fatso, which I would use like in a bit more like heavy way. So again, I would put a filter on so it wouldn't compress below 120 Hertz. My favorite setting again, but this time I would go a bit heavy, and I would push the volume of the same amount I'm compressing. So let's say I'm compressing 3 decibels, I try to add 3 on the output. So I reduce again my dynamic, and then on top of it I would add dynamics. So in this case I could add simply a brick wall limiter, and I see already that is reducing there. So it means that I'm already almost at 0. Even though I can push a bit more. So maybe I would start going back to my processors and push, getting a couple of dBs from the compressor, a couple of dBs from the tape simulation, and then I go back to my brick wall limiter, and I can see now the gain reduction. It's still not too bad. I would put auto, and I can see that now my mix is much louder. Now it's a peaking at -3. And what would I do is I would keep adding 1 dB from the compressor, 1 dB from the tape simulation, because I've been to many mastering sessions and I've seen that mastering engineers, they tend not to use gain reduction or adding gain from one element, even though they have very expensive compressors and limiters. I see that they like to work in chains, so like adding 2 compressors instead of 1. So when I apply dynamic processing, when I do my fake masters, I try to, you know, emulate what mastering engineers do. And I've been to many mastering sessions, so I've noticed that they tend not to use one processor in the whole mastering, but they actually use gain reduction and they add gain in chains of processors, either plugins or actual compressors and EQs. So what I try to do is when I'm applying my plugins on the master bus, I will start by, you know, compressing, you know, 2 dBs with my bus compressor, and then another 2 or 3 with the fatso, and then get another little, you know, dynamic control with the limiter, and then add a couple of dBs here and there, instead of just, you know, putting the fatso and compressing 7 dBs and add 7 dBs to reach my 0. So I emulate this chain that I see mastering engineers using, and once I'm fairly happy that I know that it sounds loud enough and that I can try it in the club, I would just export it as already as an MP3 320, which is mostly the format I play when I'm DJing, and then I can try it. And even though I know that we'll still get love by going into real mastering, because, you know, that's their job and they do it much better than I do, but I can still check, you know, the balance, and I can check if there is too much bass, especially, you know, in a studio environment. It's very difficult to control the super subs, the really low frequencies. So by trying it in a club, not only I can try if the actual song works, and I can try the difficult relationship in between the kick and the sub, and if the side chaining that I'm applying to the sound lets the kick go through the whole record, and yeah, and it gives me an idea if the record is good or not before actually committing to a mastering. So that's it, that's the final part of the mixing, a little bit of fake mastering, and then hopefully the song will make people dance in the club, and I'm very happy, and I'll start straight up something new. Gentlemen, are we done yet?
Yes, my lord.
Right, if you'll excuse me, I have some important matters to attend.